So welcome to another wargame review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander, and today we're taking a look at Night Drop 2 from Battles Magazine issue 12. If you've never played or anything from or read Battles Magazine is a fantastic publication. It's out of France. It's just chock full of mostly wargame reviews. There's other different bits and pieces in there, some kind of interviews or kind of theoretical pieces, but it is a ton of wargame reviews, a million pictures and stuff like that. It's an excellent publication. Getting it here in the US is a little bit of a challenge. You've got to buy it. It's not necessarily the cheapest thing to do to get it imported, but of all the magazines that the wargame magazines out there, this is one of my favorites. It's like this and C3I for me, if I'm honest. I absolutely love this magazine. It's 130 pages, which is a lot. I like the small format of it. It's got a flat binding on it, which is really nice, very convenient, very sturdy. And it's just chock full of stuff. So, had this game for a while. Night Drop 2. This is a two-player war game that covers the British airborne landings, at least most of the British airborne landings, just prior to D-Day. So you've got, I think it's the British 6th Airborne Division, I believe, and if it's not, I'm very sorry about that. So you've got 5th Parachute Brigade and 3rd Parachute Brigade. And it's them landing. Pegasus Bridge it starts with the game set up with that kind of initial landing, but it's mostly just all the parachute infantry dropping. You have to roll all of that, and it's exactly what you would expect. You set them all up, and then you chuck a bunch of dice. Takes a little bit of time, and all of these face-down sticks spread out over the board, and so you don't really know. You have all these little bits, these small counters that have icons on the bottom, and you're trying to spend half the game reconstituting those, and then you flip them over, see what you've got, and that'll either give you a full strength or a half strength company that's now like a real combat unit that you can go and combat with. Can't combat with any of the sticks. But you set them all up, you spread them all out, and then you also roll on a table to see like how many of them straight up don't make it, how many of them die on landing and stuff like that. And so things can get pretty brutal that way as well. But the first few turns are night turns, and it's a game of moving your sticks, trying to get them together so that they can reform, and then the German player has the option to spend their turn spreading your sticks out, and they do that as a delaying tactic, obviously, but every time they do that, they're not activating their own combat units to reinforce victory point places or to go and attack your sticks that are extremely vulnerable when they're not formed into combat units. So the German player's got some real interesting balance to play there as well. But, you know, generally speaking, this is a very beautiful, I will say that off the bat, hex encounter war game. You know, plays pretty quickly. I think I played this in a couple of hours, you know. It was my first time playing. The rules are this very small little magazine lit. I don't know what you call it. This little insert that came in here. 10 little half pages. But as such, the game, you know, isn't the most complicated, because it can't be to fit this format, but also isn't supposed to be. Played it in a couple hours. It was very playable. And you know, I would play it one or two more times maybe, and that's kind of, at that point, you've kind of got your money's worth out of this magazine that you've also read. Now, I'm here on my own. I played this Solitaire. I do a good amount of solo wargaming. This is designed as a two-player wargame, but I wanted to play it just to kind of play it because I'd read a book recently that had like piqued my interest. And I'm like, oh, I have this. I should play this. And this was extremely enjoyable, and it was also, with a few minor adjustments, eminently playable. And I'll go into kind of some of those differences, the changes that I've made. But the changes were basically the German player randomly selects their reinforcements from a cup and looks at them, and it has a little icon on them of where they enter the map. Especially during the night turns, they have to come out of that space. I had made a little chart and lined them all up, and then there are these little secret hidden markers that you just cover them up with. And I kind of just like did that and tried to look, and after 10 minutes I'd forgotten what the hell any of the units were anyway, so it worked great. There's a little bit of a randomizer there. And you only reveal them when you attack them, so there was I never knew what I was attacking as the British player. You launch into combat, then you reveal the German units, and it's like, oh no, I sent this poor little parachute company to attack this huge armoured unit, and it's not good. So it soloed just fine as the British player. To solo this as the German player would be a bit more complicated, because you would have to figure out their strategies. But it would be a bit more of a two-handed thing. I tried to set up my Solitaire two-player games where I could have like a defined strategy, or the defender plays fairly reactively. And in this one, because the German player doesn't have a lot of units, and they have a lot of fixed victory point places on the map that they have to defend, it was very obvious that, like, hey, you send your units there, and that's what they do. So as such, what I would say is, as a two-player game, the German player has some stuff to do, but they have much less to do. This is a very British offensive game, and that's fine, but just know that going into it, and this was a perfectly fine Solitaire experience. I had a great time with it. It is a gorgeous production. I really like Battles Magazine. They always have good artwork, illustrations, and it's well laid out, and the editing. That has translated into this game as well. I also have Storm Over Madrid from them, which has a slightly different style to it, but also, you know, very nice looking, very well produced game. And what I mean by that is I think that is a theme. I think they have a good standard, so to speak. So I'll play that later on and let you know how that one is as well. But what I will do is, you know, before I waffle on anymore, I'll kind of show you the board, how it works, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So here's a look at the map, and bear in mind this is the very, very end of the game. So most of the stuff has kind of happened, but first off, I really like the style of the map. I think it's just a very different, refreshing color palette and look to it, and I would very much like to highlight the frankly gorgeous counter artwork. I think it's really, really nice to look at. I just think it's such a cool visual style. It's just, I don't know, it's very appealing, and I would play a million games in this. But the game is at most 11 turns long, and it's kind of a game of activations. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to set up all of these different stacks from 5th Para Brigade, and then 3rd Para Brigade, and then also, yes, and so you're going to have, that's what these red setup bits are here. So you got this landing zone here, the blue one here, and then the green one up here. Here it is. And so you're going to have these stick counters, and these are all face down, and they're shuffled up and mixed up, so you have no idea what they are. And there's a bunch of them. And you're going to make stacks of 3 or 4 of them, depending on where you're located. And then you're going to, so the setup takes a little bit of time, because you're going to have a stack of 3 or 4 on every single one of these little points over here and here. And you're, for every counter, you're going to roll 2d6, and that's going to give you a direction and a number of spaces that they move. The next one, same thing. Next one, same thing. Next one, same thing. Then you go to this stack and do it. So what you're going to end up with is just a bunch of these sticks everywhere. And the first probably 3 or 4 turns of the game is a knight turns, and you have to move your sticks. So on a British or Commonwealth activation, you're going to move your sticks, but at night the sticks can only move one space. And so what you're doing is you're saying 1, 2, 3, and you're trying to. So these guys are going to go 1, 2, 3, and you're trying to get your sticks to kind of form up into their companies, and it takes a lot of time. And then what you're going to do is, once you have 2 or 3 in a stack, and what I will tell you is you almost always want to wait till you have 3. When you have 3 in a stack, at the end of that activation, you're going to flip these over, and I have these little markers just to remind me where they were, and you're going to flip them over. And then you have these 3 counters, and depending on their composition is what you're going to get. So we have a private, and a leader, and so that's going to give you, or a platoon, and a leader, I guess is what they're saying. That gives you a full strength company of the matching color into that space. That was great. That's what you want. If you ever have 3 platoons, then there's no leadership, so you would replace that with a half strength counter. If you only have so when you're starting to get desperate or want to take some risk, if you've only got 2 counters, you can flip them over. In this instance, you've got 2 platoons with no leadership. They can't even form a half-strength company, so they just sit there like that, and they don't do anything. If you had flipped those and it was a platoon, and a leader, you would get a half-strength company out of that. You have to have some leadership to form up in that instance. Now, what you can do in later turns is these guys can move, you can stick a guy on here, and at the end of the activation, he's going to bring them to full strength. But whilst the units are still kind of sticks like this, regardless of if they're face up or face down, they cannot participate in combat, and they're extremely vulnerable. Now, the Germans don't have a lot of units set up on the board, especially to start with, and so they can't do too much damage to you, but they can cause some real havoc. If they start launching units out, they'll just move next to you, and their combat is they'll kill all the sticks if there's no companies to fight, or if if you have some stuff stacked together, they can fight the companies, and any sticks that are remaining will get eliminated. So you have to try to form up as quickly as possible to protect those extremely vulnerable sticks. Yeah, so this guy's going to form up. I've got 2 P's and an L. Great, I got another company out of this. So you're trying to do that, but you're trying to do it all over the map, and you can't mix your colors. So sometimes you roll really strong drift one way or the other, and you're like, oh, I got to run all the way across the map. And in night turns, sticks move 1 space, and it takes a long time, and it feels really bad. Once you get past the first 4 turns into day, they can start moving a lot further and kind of form up because they can see where they're going and they know where they are. A little bit better at least. But it's a really fun aspect of the game. And why that is because the game turn is simply you roll for initiative, which is simply a d6 roll-off. The Germans have initiative. And then you alternate, you have 2 activations each. And an activation for the British is you activate either 5th para or 3rd para. That's your 2 activations. You can't do the same activation twice in a turn. So my first activation is going to be to activate the 5th Parachute Brigade, and they're going to do everything that they want to do, move all their units, do any combats, and it's you move everyone, then you do all your combats. That's important in this one. Then the Germans are going to have an activation, and the Germans are going to activate either a d6 of their own units, or they are going to roll and activate a number of opposing units, specifically opposing sticks. And they're going to roll 2d6 worth of sticks. And that's something that's really fun. So they're going to take their activation, then it comes back to the British, and we're going to do we're going to activate third parachute brigade, which is all the greens and all the blues. They can do all their moves and all their fights, and any reconstitutions at the end of the turn after you've done your moves and fights. Then it goes back to the German side, and they're going to activate either a d6 of their own units, or they can activate one of the either 5 or 3 para to move them. And that's a turn. I get a big activation of this formation, you get an activation of either your units or one of my formations, and you go back and forth, you do it twice, and then you move on to the next turn. So the pace of the game is very quick, especially because once everything starts getting amalgamated, you don't have a whole lot of units on the board, and everything moves pretty quickly, and it's not the most complicated game of all time. Now, what I wanted to talk about is so I'm trying to, as the British, move my little sticks and form them up, especially in the night turns. It's very slow, trying to get them together. The Germans, instead of activating their own units, they can activate your parachute brigades, and what they're going to do is they're going to roll 2d6, and they're going to activate, that was a terrible roll, 5 of your sticks. So they're going to move them back apart, and they're going to spread them out, so that you have to spend more time. It's this delaying thing, and the German player has to weigh up, do I spend more time delaying the form-up to prevent them taking the victory points, which are all of these bridges up here that they got to destroy, and then a couple of victory points here on Pegasus Bridge and in Ranville, and then up here in Lemenil. Who knows? I don't know how to speak French, and also the Merville Battery as well. But you're trying to delay the formation of all of that. But every time you're doing that, you're not strengthening your own position. So you have to find a balance of doing that. Do you go really hard with keeping everyone spread out so they can't do anything for the first few turns? Because once it gets to daylight, they're going to be able to kind of zip back together pretty quickly. Or do you just start hammering on your own German forces? Because the German player is going to roll a d6. If they're activating their own forces, they're going to move 6 units. Well, when you start the game, you're going to have about 3 on the board, because they were caught so unawares. So what you're going to do is you're going to then have the German player has a cup, and they're going to draw a unit out, and they can draw 1 unit out, and if it's a night turn, let's say they draw out of their little cup, and they pull this little guy, he's going to come out on an F, and so you look for the F entry point, it's all the way up here. And the cool thing about this game is the German player puts this counter on top. So the German player knows what it is, but the British player doesn't. And so he's going to come on here, and that's one of your 6 activations. He's going to go, 1, 2, 3, 4, and he's going to start. They come in off the edge to protect some of these bridges, or they might come down here to start counter-attacking and things like that. Putting pressure on here so that we can't just evacuate everyone and hammer on the bridges, for example. But there is a lot of hidden information in this game where neither player is allowed to look at the sticks when they're face down. It's pretty neat. And if the German player ever eliminates sticks, they're removed without being revealed, so the British player doesn't know what they've lost. And that's important because if they start losing, there are some little HQ units. If you start losing all your HQ units, that removes the capacity to put out these victory point chits. Because the victory point chits are only ever placed when you reveal an HQ unit, because your HQ tells you, hey, this is our goal, this is what we've got to go and do. And so if all the leaders are dead, no one knows what their objectives are supposed to be in that sense, or it's harder to organize for those, and so they don't become, their worth isn't realized, which is a really neat concept for that. But the Germans are going to have a bunch of these hidden units. Every single one of their units is hidden, except for the Merville Battery, because they knew what it was. And so you've got these hidden units kicking around the board. So every time the British player engages in combat, it's this unknown. And so there's this risk element to it until the first time that they're attacked. We go and attack them, we reveal it, okay, that's what we do the combat. Combat is really simple. Each unit has an attack value on the left and a defensive value on the right. And you just add to that a defensive terrain modifier, and if you've got supporting units, you add those as well. So here we got our little commandos. Let's say there's 2 guys in here. So this is my lead unit. He's got 4 attack. For each supporting unit, we add 1. Real simple. If I've got a bunch of red units and we're all attacking, pick a lead unit. Everyone else, regardless of how many you've got, adds +1 each. So I've got 4, 5, and we're attacking a 2 and a 2, and village has village has a defensive factor of 2. And so you're just going to compare those 2 values, and you are going to add to that a d6. And it really is that simple. I lied. You have a defensive value of 2. Each additional defender is a +1. So it's a 2, 3 for the extra unit, 4, 5 for the village. So we're a 5 on a 5. You just roll 2d6. So we had 5, 6, 7, 8 to a 10. And then we get into the kind of cool part. The combat results table, which is very small and also doesn't need to be printed on the board, but also wasn't. These are the combat results in the little rule book. But effectively, the first... So you take the net difference, and that's who wins or loses. So in this one, the German defenders won. So what you have to do is you have to apply losses to each kind of unit that was attacked. So there's a net difference of 2. That's important. So the first net difference is the lead unit has to retreat or be reduced, and that is the owning player's choice. So I'm going to retreat now. The next unit has to retreat or be flipped over, and that is the non-phasing, the defender's choice. So they're going to flip this one. And then if there was a third unit, they would have to retreat and be flipped. No choice, that's what you do. So, and if, for example, you had only the 1 unit, they would have to retreat or be flipped, owner's choice. So they're just going to retreat. And then they would have to retreat or be flipped by the defender's choice. So you could retreat them again, or you could flip them. But everyone has to have taken some kind of a combat result before you can apply a second combat result to a unit. You can't just say, oh, he's going to move and be killed, or I'm going to kill this guy and not retreat the other guy. You do have to kind of spread the results out, but that's the combat. The combat's very simple, which is nice and keeps the game pacey and light and exactly what it's kind of supposed to be. But the game is really tight. I played this Solitaire, and the modifications that I made for it being Solitaire weren't that many, because the Germans don't have a ton of units, and so they're going to go and protect the very valuable victory points that they think that they have. But the cool part is that if you play it 2-player, the Germans do not know what most of the victory point value chits are. The British player does, so he can't know exactly what they are. And the British player basically has to get them all, but he's going to target the most expensive ones first. So that's, or most likely will, and that's going to kind of relay that information to the German player. But playing at Solitaire, I just played with them face up because it didn't really matter. And the German reinforcements, I had written down their entry point on them, and then I just rolled a die as to which one that I got. Because instead of having because that way I set them up on this little chart that I had made with the markers on them, so that I didn't know what they were. Because normally you fish them out of a cup, and the German player can see them and analyze them, and then they put that marker on them. But I didn't want to know what they were, so I just set them all up blindly with the corresponding. So this one is well, no, that's a bit terrible example. So this A unit, it says A, it comes in at spot A on the board, which is down here. He had this marker on him. This one has a C, he comes in at C, which is all the way over here. They all had markers on them so that that was my little kind of fog of war solitaire part of it, so that I didn't know what the units were, and that worked perfectly fine. Once they're revealed, and then that's only super mega important because they have to come into these spaces during night turns. During day turns, you can choose where they come in. So you would I still wouldn't know what they were, but instead of him having to come into A, you just say, I'm going to roll a die, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'd roll a d10 and re-roll 10s. Oh, I got this guy. I rolled a 2. And you could bring him on wherever you want, still hidden in a day turn. So, but the game is not that super complicated. It's a big struggle during the night turns. You can't move very far. You don't project a lot of zones of control, especially if you're half companies. And then it comes to the day, and all of a sudden you can see where you're going. You know where your objectives are. You're a bit more heavily located, and at that point, your units have, like, the British para companies have a movement value of like 6, and all the German units have a movement value of 5, and then the sticks have a movement value of 3, I believe. And it becomes all of a sudden this crescendo in the middle of the game where everything is suddenly like go 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 go, and you're charging up the roads across the maps to try and rush and get everything. But by the time you've got to that point, the game can end in turn 9, so you only have about 5 turns to do it, and defenders can be extremely difficult to dislodge if they're in good terrain near objectives and things, especially kind of up here in these regions if you haven't taken those quickly and early on. So it was a really, really enjoyable, fun little game. But generally speaking, that's kind of how this game works. And what I'll do is I'll wrap up with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the map, and at least most of how the game works. It's not a particularly complicated game, which for, a hex encounter, reasonably light magazine game is kind of what you want. You want to kind of set up, play the thing. It was very enjoyable. You had a good time with it, and you got it free in a magazine. So I don't know if you might be able to pick up Night Drop 2 Pegasus Bridge on Noble Knight, who are a sponsor of this channel. We're very appreciative of that. You might be able to check it out there, but you can always try looking around on the second-hand market. But I know that this particular magazine and the games in it might be kind of hard to get a hold of. And what I would say to you is just get in front of the 8-ball and just buy the magazines when they come out. That way you don't have to worry about getting back issues and things, which might be very, very difficult. So I had a really enjoyable time playing this. It was beautiful to play with, and it was nice to play something that was a little bit different from some of the other games that we play. And I both thematically, I don't think I've played a game about this. Like, Pegasus Bridge in this game is 2 hexes, and Ham and Jam start set up on it. The Oxford and Bucks have already taken it, and they just kind of sit there and defend the bridge. I've played a game on Pegasus Bridge where you have to do that, and your units are the Oxford and Bucks, led by Major Howard, and you land in your gliders, you get out, you have to go and take out the machine gun pit and the pillbox in front of the bridge, and there's some German reinforcements that come. You have to go and take the bridge spaces. I've played that, but Pegasus Bridge is the name of this game. That's the subtitle, but it's 2 hexes on this very large map, and they're basically static and don't do anything. It really is the rest of the stuff. Trying to take all the bridges, going over the Ladiv, and destroy all of those to cut off the eastern flank of kind of Operation Overlord to prevent German reinforcements rushing the beach landings that are going to happen further west. So what you're doing is very important in this game from an operational standpoint, but the game itself is so easy to play and plays at a very quick pace. I was very happy with that element of it, where it was like, it didn't overstay its welcome. You were just like, oh, fast and furious, and all of a sudden that turn 9 creeps up on you, and you roll a d6 at the end of turn 9, and the game might end. And had it done, I think I may have lost. I would not have done nearly as well as I did. It may have been like a tactical victory, which is effectively a draw at that point. But depending on the location of the random victory chits and where those come out, really kind of changes your focus. I had some very strong ones up in the, well, what would you say that? The way I was looking at it is like the northwest quadrant of the map, but I know that that's actually not. It's actually the southeast. But so I had to like charge across the map, and I felt like I was leaving myself very vulnerable. But had those chits come out in a different way, I would have had a really strong base, and it would have been kind of picking off little 1s and 2s up at the top. Would have been a very different kind of a story to it as well. Maybe you would hold off on doing certain different bits and pieces. So all in all, I had a really enjoyable time playing this. If you have the opportunity to get hold of it, even if you're a solitaire player, that's how I played it, I would give it a go. It's a really beautiful looking game and looking production, but if you're having a struggle getting a hold of it, just look into Battles Magazine. I haven't played any of their other games, but if it's anything of this kind of a standard, where it's like just an eminently playable and enjoyable game, you're probably going to get something that's worthwhile, and then, saves you from having to slog through the second-hand market to try and find anything that's worth the price of entry. So, all in all, very enjoyable, very simple. This could be someone's first text encounter war game. It really could be. I had a blast playing it, and I've always enjoyed airborne games, and Grant will attest to this as well, because of that airdrop part. There's so much uncertainty in the setup, and this is no exception to that. It's fun. Here's my stacks of units, and rolling to disperse them, and then you roll a die. So you roll 2d6, and then there's a little chart, and the German player removes that many of the pieces, and the British player doesn't get to know what they are. So they might have, the German player doesn't know what they are either, but neither player knows whether they might have removed like all of the HQs or all of your leaders by accident. And so then you're never able to form these full strength companies, and so your sticks don't go as far because you need extra 4 sticks to make a full company instead of the 3. It's really, really neat how that works. But it's just fun seeing all that dispersal and the kind of the chaos and the randomness, and then the form up and then the race to the objectives was really engaging, and I had a fun time with it, especially considering it was a magazine game. So I appreciate you very much for tuning in. Had a blast with this one. Night Drop 2 Pegasus Bridge from Battles Magazine 12. Check it out if it's something that you're interested in, something you can get a hold of, frankly. But I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.